There's now, of course, a suspect in custody in the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, but the path that got us to this point was not exactly a smooth one. Hours after the shooting on Wednesday, FBI Director Kash Patel announced on social media that, quote, the subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. According to the New York Times, Patel wrote the message after speaking with agents working the case and quickly posted it himself without consulting his leadership team. Now, just 2 hours later, Patel made an abrupt about-face, posting again on social media, quote, the subject in custody has been released after an interrogation by law enforcement. Our investigation continues. The next day, Patel flew to the scene in Orem, Utah, where he stood silently during a brief 10-minute press conference that yielded little new information. It was only after the killer's family decided to turn him in that an arrest was finally made. All of this has prompted deep concern, understandably, among career officials at the FBI, where the New York Times says Patel's handling of the case has, quote, revived concerns about his lack of experience, obsession with social media, and purge of some of the Bureau's most experienced investigators. And tonight we have new details about what Director Patel was doing on the night of Kirk's death, as the investigation was in its critical stages. According to new reporting from MSNBC's Ryan Riley, FBI Director Kash Patel was dining at Rouse in New York on Wednesday night after the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk. Two sources familiar with his whereabouts told NBC News. Patel had posted on X at 6:21 p.m. that the subject in Kirk's killing was in custody. Rouse, a well-known restaurant that is notoriously, apparently, I'm not a New Yorker, tough to get into, it opens at 7 p.m. At 7:59 p.m., Patel posted a follow-up post that the subject in custody has been released after an interrogation by law enforcement. In response to a question about whether Patel was at the restaurant when he posted about the investigation, as well as a request for comment about the criticism of the director, the FBI said in a statement that it, quote, worked with our law enforcement partners in Utah to bring to justice the individual allegedly responsible for the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk, and we will continue to be transparent with the American people with real-time updates as we are able. Now, that statement doesn't exactly scream transparency, does it? And this entire episode has, of course, raised some very real, or reminded us of some very real and very predictable questions about the person in charge of the FBI. Joining me now is Andrew Weissman, former FBI General Counsel and an MSNBC legal analyst. Andrew, there's been a lot of reporting. You've talked a lot about kind of how people have digested the last couple of months. And this anecdote about, according to Ryan Riley's reporting, I'll just reiterate, that Kash Patel kept his reservation at Rouse, even though as there was a manhunt led by the department he runs for the person responsible for the killing of his close friend. I wanted to talk to you about this for so many reasons, but one being there are so many excellent law enforcement officials working throughout the FBI, career officials, and they have a leader at the top who is tweeting without consulting the leadership team and sitting in a fancy New York restaurant. And I just wanted to see how you thought that particular detail was being digested.
Well, let me just tell you what normally would happen and should happen after something like this so that people can see what they're owed. And that is that after any incident like this, and Jen, you know this from your government experience, I know it from having worked for Robert Mueller. Remember, he was a Republican appointed by George Bush for his first 10-year term. And I say that because the point is this is not a partisan issue, is there is an after action report that's done where you look at the situation and you figure out, are there things that we could have done better? Mm-hmm. Obviously, if the reporting is accurate that the director of the FBI was not immediately in a sensitive information facility to learn exactly what's going on and provide direction, that's an issue. Why he issued a tweet that it's not just jumping the gun, but why you issue a tweet that would suggest that you have the suspect. And that has enormous effects in terms of public safety, which is that you want people to be secure. And if they think that you have the suspect, they're going to be, it's thank God nothing happened. But you want to make sure the public is aware, is the person at large or are they not at large? And also the FBI and local law enforcement were counting on the public to give information. If they thought that they didn't have to do that because you have the information, that also is counter to what the public is owed, what Mr. Kirk is owed, what his family is owed. There are issues about whether the SAC was really the right person, that is the special agent in charge at the location, who seemed to play a surprisingly limited role when the FBI is usually at the forefront in terms of handling the case. And then finally, what is going to happen in terms of domestic terrorism? If you think about, again, not what happened, but what are you trying to prevent going forward, you're going to be asking, the domestic terrorism groups were basically dismantled to go do immigration work. But domestic terrorism, like international terrorism, is an ongoing, continuing problem. So all of those are the kinds of things that the public is entitled to answers and to know that the FBI is doing that kind of after action report, so that you reduce the risk of this happening again and that you're better prepared for when it happens again. And that, by the way, is something you do even if you thought it went well. And obviously there are lots of signs here that it didn't go well.
That's so helpful for people to know and understand. And yes, I've worked with a lot of law enforcement, but never in the FBI as you have. And it's important to remind people what's normal and what's not in these moments. Let me just ask you, I mean, this tragedy hit right as there is also a lawsuit. It's not related to this, of course, from several senior former FBI officials who were fired by Patel. I mean, it essentially alleges Patel has lost sight of the Bureau's core mission in order to carry out the president's retribution campaign. It was, of course, predated this week. How does an after-action report like that, anything like that, impact? Does it impact a lawsuit like that? And what's next there, do you think?
Well, let's just remember the allegations there are quite damning, and they're quite damning in part because they really go to Kash Patel's credibility. He swore under oath during his confirmation hearing that there was no enemies list, that people would not be fired just because they were assigned to a particular case, for instance, the January 6th case, and that all internal rules of the FBI would be followed. But according to this lawsuit, and again, it's allegations, it remains to be proved, that is directly opposite what he in fact did, and I think is probably widely believed within the FBI he did, which is, engage in a witch hunt at the behest of people above him in the Department of Justice and at the White House. So in terms of his leadership, you really have lots of indications that if you are a serious career person at the FBI, you do not have a leader. And I want to just make sure people understand, having worked for a leader who was so revered and respected, in a situation like this, that is who you need to be coordinating and deciding what to do, what not to do, what leads are the most promising. Here, it feels like we got lucky. That's not a way to run a law enforcement agency, and that's why you do an after action. And you do have to ask yourself, Kash Patel, Don Mangino, are they the people who are bringing what's necessary to the table? Because this is not a time to learn on the job. And again, I want to make sure it's the public side that Mr. Kirk and his family are owed that, because you want to make sure this is happening in the most thorough and professional way possible.
Thank you, Andrew, for explaining that and helping people really understand what happens at the FBI.